Okay, back here on the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you again. And let's talk about Udo Dirkschneider. And Udo Dirkschneider is releasing another album. It is called Balls to the Wall Reloaded. Basically, a re-recorded version of the Balls to the Wall album originally put out by Accept in the early 80s. So I had a chance to listen to this. Now, anytime bands talk about re-recording an album, it's probably a 50-50 shot whether I'm really going to like the re-recording, and probably even lower than that as to whether I will like the re-recording better than the original. Most of the time, I like the original better, and most of the time, it's a 50-50 shot whether I think the re-recording is great. And to be honest with you, so many bands have done this now. Anytime I hear about, we're going to re-record an entire album, it's kind of like I take that with a grain of salt. I don't really get uber super excited over it. It just doesn't really do anything for me when a band announces that. I always find it interesting when bands do this because sometimes they add some different elements into the music, a lot of subtle stuff. Like when I talked about Iron Savior and Pete re-recording a bunch of their music, mostly because the older albums are unavailable and nobody really knows who owns the rights to them to put those out. He adds some kind of really cool elements that you didn't have in the originals. And in some cases, the originals sound, the re-recorded versions sound better than the originals. So, Udo Dirkschneider, when I first read he was re-recording Balls to the Wall, I'm kind of like, what's the point of doing that? Like you're re-recording an album that you basically recorded with Accept with your solo band. However, when I started reading further down the press release, I realized he did something pretty unique that you don't really see every day. And that is each song has a guest singer. And on top of that, guest singers that are a lot different, who have a much different vocal style than Udo does. So let's go take a look at this list. I'm going to flash this list of singers up here on the screen. Check this out. And look at what we have here. So you go down the track listing, Balls to the Wall, you got Joachim Broden from Sabaton. Very, very good choice, by the way. You have Biff Bifford from Saxon singing London Leather Boys. Mil Petroza from Creator singing Fight It Back. Nils Mohn from Dynasty singing the song Head Over Heels. Losing More Than You Ever Had, featuring Michael Kiske from Halloween. I'm going to get into that a bit because Michael Kiske, obviously a much different styled vocalist than Udo. Got Eva Eriksson of Brothers of Metal singing Love Child. Danko Jones singing Turn Me On. Dee Snider from Twisted Sister singing the song Losers and Winners. Tim Ripper Owens doing Guardian of the Night. And then, of course, Doro Pesch doing Winter Dreams. A pretty good amount of European musicians and German musicians, for that matter. A lot of really great vocalists on here. So, there is not one bad singer on this. And you have a variety of singers singing these songs. So when you listen to the album, Udo sings on these tracks along with these other singers, and they do backing vocals. Now, when I hear guys like Dee Snider or like Tim Ripper Owens or Mil Petroza, when I listen to those names, when I first saw them on this list, I'm kind of like, okay, that makes sense. Those guys have a lot of grit in their voice. They could definitely pull these songs off without a problem. And their takes on these songs were quite interesting. Like Dee Snider, he's got a pretty rough voice, like Udo does. Tim Ripper Owens can definitely hit the lower end of the vocal spectrum, and he has a lot of grit in his voice, and I think his song is great. But where it got interesting for me was hearing people like Biff Bifford from Saxon or Michael Kiske from Halloween singing these songs, because those two guys are two completely different singers than Udo. Now, Biff singing London Leather Boys was actually pretty cool. And then, they'll trade off verses in these songs. And then obviously when the chorus of the song comes up, they're doing backing vocals for each other. Biff's song was interesting, but the most interesting was Michael Kiske. Not really just because I'm a Halloween fan, but it's more or less the fact that he's a more operatic singer, and Udo's just this guy that sings, has a raspy voice and sounds completely the opposite of Michael Kiske. And when I was listening to Michael Kiske sing this song, I was actually quite I was expecting, I'll be honest with you, I like Michael Kiske, one of my favorite singers of all time, really great person, really cool dude, but I'm like, is he really going to sound good on this song? Because he doesn't have a gritty voice like Udo. And to be honest with you, I was quite shocked at how good the song sounded with him. And what was really cool and unique is that when they get to the chorus of the song, obviously Udo's doing the lead vocals in it, but you could hear Michael's voice backing him up. And it sounded really cool. I was really quite surprised how good this actually was. But, when you go down this list of vocalists, all of these guys probably listened to Accept at some point in their lives, or really got into that band, or got into Udo, maybe even toured with him, right? Especially a lot of the German musicians. I'm sure Mil Petrosa, being a German guy, you grew up listening to Accept. Doro Pesch, listening to it, probably came up in the scene in the early 80s, probably played shows with Accept, listened to them over the years. And, Michael Kiske, obviously knowing, probably listening to them as well. But I just thought that was an interesting thing. And every singer that was on this album did a great job. So I would tell you that this re-recorded or reloaded version of Balls to the Wall is very, very good. It's not your typical re-recording where they just go and redo the songs and that's it. You have a lot of really great singers, guest singers on this album. I'll be honest with you, it is probably one of the best re-recorded versions of an album that anybody has ever done. Now, the original is obviously a classic, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, when it comes to re-recording an album, I'm going to be honest, this is one of, if not the best re-recorded classic album that any band has ever done. And a big reason for this, at least for me, are the guest vocalists. Because you not only brought in a lot of guest vocalists, you brought in a lot of awesome guest vocalists from a lot of really, really great bands. Like, there's nobody on this list of singers where I looked at it and be like, oh, that's going to suck. Was skeptical of a couple of them until I heard the songs. But in general, not only are these songs well recorded, not only does Udo's band play them perfectly, but I just think it was a really great idea to bring so many guests on this album, because Balls to the Wall is probably one of, if not the biggest Accept album that they ever put out, maybe as far as sales, right? And celebrating it, which it feels more like a celebration of that record. I think doing what Udo has done with this, again, one of, if not the best re-recorded version of an album any band has ever done. I got excited. I'll be honest with you. Most of these re-recorded albums, I don't get very excited for them. But with this one, I'll be honest. When I saw the list of singers, I was stoked. Even the ones I was skeptical of. Like, I was eager to hear what this would sound like. So when I finally ended up getting the promo of it and listening to it, it's really cool. I would give this, as far as a re-recording goes, 10 out of 10. Most re-recordings, 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. Some of them get above that. This is definitely one that's unique because the entire approach to it was perfect. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.